Hey folks, this is Alexander Winn.
Hi, I'm Lacey Hannan.
And we are here with the latest episode of The Synthesis. This week we are discussing The Martian by Andy Weir, chapters 20 through 22. And,
We discovered yet again that I took all of the notes and Alex took next to none comparatively.
I took this many notes and Lacey took 6 pages of notes.
Listen, I was a debater. I don't know how many of you were debaters, but if I didn't come fully prepared, I might not win, and that was totally unacceptable.
All right, well, the odds are you'll win tonight.
Win. It's a pun.
Yeah.
It's a pun that I can accept.
Yeah.
Oh, that was sweet. It took me a minute to catch that one. That was good.
All right, so we start out this week in chapter 20 as Mark is making his rover modifications. He's still at the Hab, but he's going to have to make the long and arduous journey to the Ares 4 launch site, and so he's having to do a lot of updates to the rover to get it to carry everything he'll need.
Yes, and he skips a bunch of the construction stuff, which is fine because that's not what I'm here for this time. I mean, if this was a book that wasn't about scientific, like the engineering and all of that stuff, it'd be totally fine. But I'm not here for construction when it comes to The Martian. So I don't want to put down any construction workers because their jobs are hard, and I'd actually be curious about their jobs.
Fair enough. He does mention, by the way, it tickled the heck out of me, he mentioned that he's doing these modifications with the Pathfinder murdering drill.
Yes.
Which is very charming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I like the explanation of the ARIC, the atmospheric regulator external component.
Yep.
Which is what freeze separates the air and he puts it outside instead of so that Mars can cool it.
It's sort of like a air conditioning unit in your window. It's part of it is inside and part of it is hanging outside.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that. I also like that at the end of that first log, he says, I'm gonna do my logs every day, and then he waits 4 days.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It.
I'll log every day, and then he jumps from 376 to 380.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's me. Yeah. Whenever I say I'm gonna start like a new habit in my morning routine, like I'm gonna journal every day. No, I'm not. I'm not gonna.
That's simply not happening.
It's not how it works.
He does mention that he's working 4 hours a day and then relaxing, plus he's taking days off, which, is nice. Like, with this kind of story, if this were a movie trailer or whatever, you would probably frame this guy as sort of working all night, working all the time to try to survive. I really appreciate the fact that, no, it's like, that's how you hurt yourself, man. Like, he's going to work for a few hours and then he's going to go watch TV.
And he literally does not have the time or, help to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. He cannot afford to get hurt. Yeah. It's better to take it slow, take days off, relax in the bath.
And shouldn't we all be able to work like that?
I mean, right?
We tried 4-day work weeks and it only didn't work because everybody, like all of the other companies we work with, are on 5-day work weeks. Yeah. And it was such a huge pain in the butt to communicate with anybody. So
but 4-day work weeks
if we could all just agree to do 4-day work weeks.
Yes. I guess the lesson here is approach self-care like you're stranded alone on Mars.
That's right. I like that.
It's a good lesson. We should get a sign. Yeah. Get a sign made. Take care of yourself like you were stranded on Mars.
Okay, so there's a point where he talks about in his Soul 380 log where he talks about the heat reservoir.
Yes.
And I read it and then realized I had read it. My goodness, words are hard. And didn't understand it and didn't feel like going back and rereading it. So I'm going to have you explain it to me.
Yes. So the problem that he has is that he needs to reduce the electrical requirements for the equipment that he's bringing.
Yes.
And he realizes that several of the machines supercool the air for various reasons, and then warm it back up because otherwise it would be pumping, air at like -50 degrees into the Hab, and that's going to, kill you.
Him.
So they have a heating mechanism to heat up the air. But what he realizes is that the vast majority of the electricity that these things pull goes to heating the air. So if he can get that heating component to be unnecessary, he can radically drop the electricity needs.
Yes,
and that means more power goes to the rover.
And we discovered that.
Right. So his solution is he has the RTG, the big box of radiation, and that is constantly putting out heat.
Yeah.
And so what he's doing is he's taking the RTG, which you can picture as just sort of like a really big sort of cylinder, right? And he puts it in a Ziploc bag, basically. And I actually really love the fact that he struggles to get a vacuum seal. He struggles to get all the air out, because if there's any air in there, it's going to get superheat and it's going to melt the bag and it's going to cause problems. So he just uses the airlock. He's just like, oh, right, I've got an airlock. So he goes out into the airlock and sucks out all the air and does it.
But
so,
wait,
yeah.
hold on. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So why is it that it would superheat the plastic with air in it, but not the plastic without the air in it?
So I'm not a super expert in thermodynamics, but
I
basically,
need you to know everything there is to know.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
But the basic idea is that water is a very good conductor of heat, and solid objects are often very good conductors of heat. Air is actually a pretty bad conductor of heat. That's why, for example, if you fall into a freezing lake, it's so much worse if you have on wet clothes, because that water is going to conduct the heat away from your body really fast. But if you drop the wet clothes, if you dry off, the air doesn't conduct the heat nearly as fast. So if you have air pockets in this heat source enclosed with plastic and then water, that air is going to heat up. The heat is going to be distributed through the air at a different rate than through the plastic and the water. And so you could get a differential that could cause problems, basically. So if you have the metal against the plastic against the water, the heat is going to distribute much more evenly. Whereas if there are pockets of air, it's going to distribute unevenly, and it could lead to certain parts of the plastic getting hotter than others and melting. And
Let's go back in your analogy.
Okay.
If you fall into the water, you mean after you get back out of the water, take off your clothes?
Yes.
Okay, you skipped a whole part.
Not stripped down while you're in the freezing water. Yeah.
I mean, you might want to do that so you don't drown, but
it's
that's a whole different thing. I was very confused. Okay, you skipped a part.
I'm here to confuse. That's my goal. But anyway, so he puts the RTG in this plastic bag, and then he submerges it in basically a big tub of water. So now the RTG is spreading its heat out into the water. You've got sort of like a sink with a heating source in it, and so it's radiating heat out into the water. So his goal is to heat up the air that is coming out of these things. So what he does is he takes the hose that would normally go into the heating component, and he lays it down. You can picture like a hose going into a tub of water and then just coiling at the bottom of the tub. So the hose is just sort of in a spiral at the bottom of the tub. And then he pokes a whole bunch of tiny little holes in the hose so that this tub full of water, you pump air into this hose, and it's a whole bunch of tiny little holes bubbling up air into the water.
Okay.
Right? And so what that does is all those tiny little holes, or all those tiny little bubbles, are now moving up through very warm water.
Yes.
And so it heats up the air in those bubbles. And then by the time the bubbles reach the top and pop and join the atmosphere, it has warmed up sufficiently that it's not going to be a danger to him.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
And the other thing he says that he realizes is that the tiny little bubbles are agitating the water. They're basically stirring the water all the time. The water is sort of bubbling and frothing like a boiling pot of water. And so it helps distribute the heat. Normally if you have a heat source in a sink, one side of the sink is going to be warmer than the other, except he's got all these tiny little bubbles constantly like shaking up the water and stirring it around, which means that it's much more evenly distributed. And so it's perfect. He's just bubbling the air up through this warm water, and now he doesn't have to worry about running the heater.
Okay, well,
yeah,
fascinating.
Very clever.
It is very clever.
Yeah.
I mean, they even say Mark is a clever man.
Yes, yes, they do.
I also like that in his cleverness, that he discovers he's a space pirate.
Yes, he does.
And
Mars is international waters, and he's going to be taking command of the Ares 4. And because he lost connection to Earth, nobody can give him permission to do that.
I mean, so long as he's in the HAB, he's on American soil, essentially. But as soon as he steps
in the Rover, he's in American soil.
Yeah, but as soon as he steps out onto Mars itself, he's in international waters based on what the
an international treaty.
Yeah, about
whatever it's called.
it's the same international treaty that's like it's based on Antarctica. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. We didn't like
Research
deep dive
it.
and
Yeah.
research into that. Sorry, guys. But I do like that he kind of walks us through why this is true,
Yes.
and he's so excited.
Very proud
So
of
now,
it.
not only is he the king of Mars,
Yep.
but
And the greatest botanist on this planet.
yes,
Yep.
he's also a space,
space pirate.
and he's the first one. I mean, let's be really clear here: space pirate.
It's actually a funny little thing. This is deep nerds who are into The Martian will often point out that this line is kept in the movie, but actually doesn't make sense because in the movie he never loses the connection to Earth. The Pathfinder never gets killed.
What?
Yeah, they just skip over that part. He's still in connection with Earth, and so why didn't they give him permission? Like he's not a space pirate. He's still in connection with Earth, so they probably would have given him permission.
I had totally forgotten that, and I don't like that at all.
I know, right?
It's such a great obstacle.
To be fair, it is one of those things. If I remember correctly, it's one of those things very much like Tom Bombadil in the Lord of the Rings movies, where they never actually say he does still have a connection to Earth. They just don't show him losing the connection to Earth. There is a point at which he stops talking to Earth, and
It's
there's
important, though. I wonder if it's
I know.
in one of those like deleted scenes or something.
Yeah, it could be.
We're gonna have to see. Okay, let's all make a pact right now that when we watch the movie, we go and find all of the deleted scenes we can.
Yes. I own The Martian and The Martian Director's Edition.
You
Like,
guys.
Yeah.
This man is such a nerd.
Yeah.
Someday I'm going to let you in on all of the little secret things that make him one of the weirdest people I've ever met. So I don't know that you're going to fully enjoy it.
All right.
I'm gonna play it
me on
all
notice.
out there.
Put me on notice.
But I think we should.
Yeah.
And if we can find it on YouTube, and we'll get everybody in on this, maybe we'll do it via Twitter or something. But we'll drop links to deleted
some
scenes
deleted
or
scenes.
whatever.
There's also, in addition to deleted scenes, as part of the marketing campaign for the movie, they made a series of short films about Mark Watney that are not they were never going to be in the movie. But they've got the cast of the
I've
Ares
never
3.
seen that.
Yeah, what they are, it's actually kind of cute. They are Ares 3 promotional videos. So it's like the videos that NASA made for the Ares 3 mission where they're interviewing the astronauts and all that kind of stuff. And so you see the candidate selection, you see their like psychological profiles.
This is charming.
I know, right? There's a video that Mark Watney makes sort of like for the kids back home when they're in orbit around Earth, and he's like giving them a tour of the Hermes and like introducing them to all the different crew members of Ares 3.
Right.
And notably, a lot of people's favorite line in this entire book is when Venkat is wondering what does it do to somebody to be so alone like that? What must he be thinking right now? And then it cuts back to Mark Watney on Mars, and he says, "How come Aquaman can talk to whales?
Yeah.
They're mammals. It doesn't make sense."
Yeah.
That line isn't in the movie, but it is in one of those marketing videos.
Oh, and it was in the trailer, right? Because people were like, "Where's this line?"
I don't think it was in the trailer, but it was in these videos that they released ahead of time. It's reframed as a psychological profile. He's talking to a shrink, and he's like, these are the things that I think about. Like, why can Aquaman talk to whales?
I must have imagined that. Which I mean, to be fair, I'm very imaginative.
It is true.
Like, I guess it makes
you live
sense.
in a world apart.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, you guys. Why don't you talk about your next note?
Yes.
I am super congested, and you don't want to hear this, so I'm going to go over there and grab some Kleenex. But you keep talking.
Yes. I did have to laugh. There's a line that we came up to right about here where he talks about how the quote is, "I spend a lot of his time sitting around on my lazy ass watching TV, but so do you, so don't judge," which I really appreciated. That's a very humanizing thing. That being said, he starts talking about his route that he's going to take to get to the Ares 4 launch site. And specifically, he's going to be going through a valley called Marth Vallis. Now, valleys on Mars are often named in Latin, so you'll hear things like the Vallis Marinaris, which just means Mariner Valley, Marth Vallis, which just means Marth Valley. So this is one of those things where it's an interesting kind of coming full circle with Marth Vallis, because he talks about how he's currently in Acidalia Planitia, which is very flat, and it's very smooth. There's not a lot of obstacles. It's sort of the perfect place for him to be. But to get to Ares 4, he's going to have to cross a lot of really rugged terrain. But he's been looking at the maps, and Marth Vallis, this valley, takes him pretty much right where he needs to go. It is exactly the highway that he needs.
Yep.
And this is something that I thought was so fascinating, because as we've been talking throughout this entire show about how using real science is such a boon to this story, and how so much of it is real, and so much of it is how you would really have to deal with things and the real challenges that you would face. And usually, 90% of the time, the real science comes in the form of obstacles. You know, you can't just make water. You have to figure out how to create water. You can't just find food. You have to grow food. All these things are real challenges. But this is the kind of stuff that I love, because the commitment to real science here actually created an opportunity. This is going to be easier than it could have been.
Yep.
Marth Vallis is going to take him right where he needs to go, and it doesn't feel cheap because it's real.
It doesn't feel like an author-created coincidence.
Exactly. This is a real thing that really exists on a real planet, and it just happens to be perfect. And so he doesn't get dinged for the convenience.
And I love when he talks about the geography. Like, and I had written this down too. Is I enjoy that he tells us, okay, wait, how do you pronounce it?
𝕊𝕚𝕤 𝕊𝕚𝕤.
𝕊𝕚𝕤 𝕊𝕚𝕤 is 650 kilometers, right? And then the Marth. Is that
Marth Vallis?
Okay. Yeah, you guys, I'm gonna butcher these, so those are the only times I'm asking.
As we have mentioned before, Lacey is reading the book with her eyes, and I am listening to the book in audiobook form, so we have a slightly different experience of it.
Yes. And he talks about how combined, that's 350 kilometers, which is just under half of the distance.
Yeah.
Right? And so like just even hearing him talk about that, hearing him talk about how Marth Vallis is an old riverbed, and then
not even a riverbed.
Not even a river. It's a It's a mega flood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bed. Well, he calls it a riverbed the first time, but then he goes on to explain that it's not a river that has been.
It was a one-day river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And essentially, it was like a flash flood on a major scale. But we'll get to that.
Carved its way through.
Yeah. But I'm a person who I love maps. I'm not the world's best at geography, but maps are fascinating to me. And he does a great job of painting a visual picture of a map. And I think most people are really awful at it, or are really boring about it.
Yes, really dry.
One of Alex's favorites, which someday we'll get there.
Yep.
He would love to do the Mars trilogy.
Telling correction. Yes, I would love to do the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson. And one of the things, whenever I recommend the Mars trilogy to somebody, I always tell them it's an incredible story. It is not paced quickly. It is a slow story. And what I often liken it to is when you're on a road trip and you're just sort of gazing out the window and you're watching the landscape roll by, and it's simultaneously really boring, but also like kind of fascinating. Like you kind of can't take your eyes off the window watching these hills go by and these beautiful images
and
of,
I mean, that's true depending on where you are.
Well, that's true.
Because like, let's take West Texas or most of Nebraska. Like, who cares? This is really, really boring.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you're going through, like like Utah or Colorado, like there's some gorgeous landscapes rolling by, and it's fun to watch. And anyway, that's what the Mars trilogy feels like, is very slow but beautiful sort of scenery.
Yeah. So I want you to know that I am appreciating how he explains scenery in this. And also, I am super flattered, Iman Economist, that you're hearing the book in my voice. I'm sorry that it's probably a congested voice, but I'm still super flattered.
Well, she's a very talented actress, don't you know?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Very much like Will Wheaton.
We have gotten almost nowhere in this chapter, and we are like deep into this episode.
Hurrying it along. Welcome to this 4-hour episode of The Synthesis.
This is what happens when we have a lot of tangents and a lot of energy.
Yes. But moving right along, he decides to make a bedroom, which is so cute.
I think
he's going to be driving, and
darling.
crammed into this little rover that's full of stuff, and he decides that he needs some personal space, which is totally understandable and also really scary.
So one of the things that I love about this is he actually takes the time to design something, and it's not surprising from Mark Watney that he would do this.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm doing any DIY project, I always wing it and then expect it to be 100% perfect, which is 100% of the time never the case. And then I get mad when it doesn't work. And here he is, he's going, I'm going to test this 3 different, like I'm going to triple check my work, and then I'm going to make a model of it.
Yeah.
And I forget that's even an option. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to do all of that.
Yeah.
And my impression of things, designing anything, is you wing it or you don't do it at all. And I forget that there's a third option, that you can be like an engineer about it.
Prepare.
Yeah. And so there's just something awesome about watching this person do something for himself. This is absolutely
this is just self-care. This is not a survival priority.
Yeah, it is mental survival. Like that's what
it's morale.
That's all it's quote unquote all it's about.
Right.
And so I love that he does it, but he really does take the time to make sure he does it right. Nothing goes wrong. And
taking pieces out of the hab, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
He does. There is another quote which I really like, and I want to make a sign out of, which is he's talking about the canvas, and when you inflate it, he says it wants to become a sphere, and that's not a useful shape. And I love the blanket. Just like spheres are not useful. That's not
I mean, unless
I know that he's talking about in this context, but I like thinking of it as just like spheres suck. Just to hell with
in
spheres,
general.
man. Yeah. He does set aside a few meals, which is cute and totally understandable. He's got 5 meals left that are actual meals, not homegrown potatoes, and he sets them aside for departure when he leaves the hab, halfway when he's halfway to Ares 4, arrival when he gets to Ares 4, hilariously survived something that should have killed me, which is and last meal, which I love that.
It is. It's like he said, I think it's maybe a bad title for that meal. But one other thing before, I know that we said we were going to move a little faster. I just meant tangents.
Yes.
I have a lot to say.
So many notes.
So here's the deal. So the whole triple checking and doing the model, he's just such a Boy Scout. And it's like he's a Boy Scout who's got a scholarship for some prestigious engineering school. And then he undervalues it because he talks about sleeping in the hab and having a hard time sleeping because it's a terrible thing to have my life depend on my half-assed handiwork. And I'm sitting here going, dude, this is the last thing you can label half-assed.
In what world are you half-assed, man?
Yeah, and so there's a certain amount of, like, I wonder if undervaluing or understating his work is a sort of defense mechanism against something. Just I don't know what it would be.
Well, it might be an indication of a little bit of imposter syndrome, that like he's a very smart guy clearly, but maybe he doesn't have as much faith in his knowledge as we do.
Yeah. And I like that there's still this confident, this imperfect confidence.
Yeah.
You know, he's confident that if he does all of these things, he will probably live.
Yeah.
But in our reality, we know that he's going to live through this. This is not where he dies. Yeah. So I don't know. I think maybe I got too caught up in this whole cutting up the hab and making this room for himself. But for me, it was very, very telling about who he is and what he needs and how he's going to accomplish things. So
there's also a nice little touch, which I really appreciated, which is that when he seals up the hab again, he's taken some pieces out and then he sort of patches it up in this kind of Frankenstein form. He's looking for leaks, and so he pressurizes the hab a little bit, and he looks for leaking air. And the way he does it is with dust. And I really appreciated that because we've actually already figured out this problem, how to find a leak, when the airlock blew up, and what he used was smoke.
Yeah. But
smoke was not a great thing to use. Smoke was a last-ditch option, and it was hard. And so now he uses dust, which is just a great, it's another one of those things where a lesser writer would have just done the thing that they already figured out, but this guy has thought about it enough that he's found a better way of solving the same problem.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I do have a problem with the fact that he used the word ghetto again.
Yeah.
But this time he did it in quotations, which is weird because he didn't do that the last time. And so I'm wondering what in the writer's head gets that designation and doesn't.
He was doing this as a blog, so maybe somebody called him out for it the first time, and now he's like a little more aware of the term.
Yeah. Well, there's later he calls something an abomination, and I think he's talking about the Hab, just like what he's done to it.
I think he's talking about the Rover.
He's talking about the Rover. And so there's a part of me that's like, I just really am here for the idea that we get like you taking the term ghetto and getting rid of it from our vocabulary and using like the word Frankenstein or, because it indicates the same thing. It's something that,
if anything, it's more applicable because ghetto just means sort of like poor and not that great. But Frankenstein is specifically a crazy science experiment.
Yeah,
and it is something that was engineered.
Yeah, he's talking about something being an eyesore. So for me, there's like a vocabulary thing kind of going on. A little bit of this vocabulary war in my head that I would like to see play out a little bit in society as a whole. But okay.
He does mention, I don't know if I've just been missing all of these references, but he drops a number on how many potatoes he has, and whoa, it's way more than I thought. He has 1,692 potatoes. That is a lot of potatoes. Like, I feel like he must have given a number earlier that I just missed, but that's like, picture 1,700 potatoes. That's a lot of
and it's amazing that he's going to actually be able to take them all with him, because he tells us how he's going to do it, but you think of those 5-pound potato bags at the grocery store, and
these have got to be littler fancy restaurant potatoes or something, because he does mention that he's eating 10 of them a day, so they're definitely not the big old football size things. And then I have a note on the ending of the chapter. Do you have?
So hold on, before we get there, I like that he asks himself, "Oh, is this the Apollo?"
Yeah.
Okay, we're in the same place.
Yeah. What would an Apollo astronaut do? And then he answers his own question. He'd drink 3 whiskey sours, drive his Corvette to the launch pad, and then fly to the moon in a command module smaller than my Rover. Man, those guys were cool.
Listen, let's talk about Mark Watney's concept, like his confidence and his concept of cool, because Mark Watney is going to be the coolest guy on earth when he gets there.
Way cooler than Neil Armstrong.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the fact that his concept doesn't include himself, I'm sitting here going, man, you have I don't know what happened to you in like middle school and high school, but you have really put that into your like self-awareness, whatever. But
I mean, they do undeniably have more swagger than he did. Like they've got more style. He's a little more practical. But man, like this guy is surviving alone on Mars for years on nothing but his own wits. Like there is no like astronaut groupie who loved the guys in the 60s who isn't gonna love you, Mark Watney. Like, come on.
I feel like so. I feel like anytime I'm in a jam now, I need to ask myself, what would Watney do?
Yeah.
And I know that the answer is like, I have no fucking clue, but I'm gonna come up with something.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna triple check my work and be meticulous.
Well,
but no, hold on.
Yeah.
This is important because we have those sorts of questions in our societal vocabulary. What would Jesus do was like a big thing in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I think it's kind of fallen out of favor, which is, what it is. Fine, mostly. But what would Watney do is just kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
And for me, there is something very specific, which is the thing that I don't do, which is be meticulous and triple check my work.
Well, and just work the problem is sort of the constant answer to that question. What would Watney do? He would work the problem. He wouldn't panic. He wouldn't just give up. He would break it down into steps and work the problem.
Yeah. Okay. So when the end of the world happens, we know that this is the starting point.
Yep.
I'm just so you know, I have a lot of points about when the apocalypse happens, and this is entirely Alex's fault, and I will explain that later. So
tune in next week.
No. It's later in the show.
My husband is going to destroy Western civilization.
Oh, I will warn you guys before that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so chapter 21.
Yes.
Great.
I think you have like 9 pages.
I
so
do.
Why don't you take it away?
Oh my God. Sorry, you guys. I have so much to say.
I've got like 9 lines.
I thought chapter 21 was way more interesting than chapter 20, and I still liked chapter 20. So here we go.
That's fair. Take it away. We'll move into hour 6.
I told you, shut up. I told you he's a Boy Scout, and he's such a Boy Scout because he's packing and arranging his Rover and his trailer like it's Tetris with these really high stake variables.
Yeah.
And all I can think of is like all of the Boy Scouts that I grew up with. And I mean, I learned how to pack for a camping trip because of them. So I'm pretty pleased with this skill set that I have. But yeah, I need to know if Watney was a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Like, just putting it out there, if Andy Weir has ever said anything about it, or if I missed anything about it in the book, someone point it out for me. Thank you.
All right.
Second, he has made himself a makeshift toilet.
Yes.
And
and it's a bucket.
Listen, speaking of camping, we went to that cabin that had this weird toilet that was just like, I had never seen one. I know that they obviously I know that they exist now, but apparently they're pretty prevalent in like camping cabins, which is, it's like just, it's a toilet seat on a bucket with a plastic bag, and then
like a trash bag.
And then it's got kitty litter at the bottom, and then it just like winds up, and then you go again. Yeah. And then when you want to, you take it out and you hang it outside.
Yeah.
And that's what it made me think of. And I was like, I for someone who grew up in the country and can handle a lot of things, I hated that toilet.
Yeah.
But I was like, good for you, man. You made a makeshift one. You know what? Good for taking care of yourself.
Yeah,
I don't know. It took me back. So
I do love, so we cut back to Earth.
Yes.
And Mindy Park, who is just so cool.
I love her.
I just love, she drops a little bomb, which is fascinating, which is that the NSA has been using their image enhancement tech, which is fascinating and cool.
I know.
Everybody's pulling in to help Mark Watney here, and the NSA is chiming in with their satellite
and it's
tech.
Wildly creepy, but you're like, yeah. Man, like,
good for you guys.
Yeah, thanks for helping out. I don't know.
We're going to meticulously not try to think about what this was used for before, but hey, you're helping out the good guys now.
So essentially she gets demoted in her
which
mind.
Really sucks. Like that's
but as Venkat says, is she calls herself a glorified peeping Tom, because Venkat says, you know more about him, you know all of the Ares 3 stuff, and you can you know what it is on site.
Nobody's better than you at identifying what we're looking at from these satellite images.
And so we need you to have eyes on Watney at all times, and everything else we're handing off to other people. Yeah. She's not happy about it. And she's like, there's nothing we can do if Watney falls behind on his modifications. And he responds with, how long have you worked for the government?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, like the government wants to know every little thing. Yeah. And that paired with the NSA thing just kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. I totally get why they need to know what is up with Mark.
And I think that comment is not just the government wants to know everything. It's also protesting inefficiency is not a winning argument here.
No, it's many things, but that was just one of the indications for me. So anyway.
Yeah. So next up, we end up cutting back to Mars, and Mark is doing a series of tests to prepare himself for this drive, and in particular, he is now testing the machines in the rover overnight, and that is scary. He spends a night with no anything going on in the hab.
Yeah, he's taken out the atmosphere regulator and the oxygenator just to see if he can get them into the trailer, see how it works, blah blah blah. Yeah. And he says, quote, there wasn't much room left for our intrepid hero, talking about himself obviously, and it's in third person. It's this third person joke is just kind of interesting because he hasn't spoken in third person, and I get that it is a joke based on things we read in science fiction and stuff like that, but it feels like it might be an indicator of something, like
that he's desocializing a little bit.
And then we learn that we learn that he, like a reminder, hey, I've been on this planet for a year and a half, which I had
almost entirely alone.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he
What, there
was
were 14 days?
Not even. I think there were like 6 days.
So there's just, I don't know. I wonder if it's an indicator of anything.
Yeah.
But what does, like, another thing that feels like an indicator is he reminds us how often he'll have to use the oxygenator, and how often he'll have to charge it when he is on his way to the Ares 4 site.
Yeah.
And he says 1 out of 3 souls he's on the 4th day he's going to have to charge. Yeah. He's going to have to get out the solar panels so he can charge all of this stuff. Yeah. And that feels like a Chekhov's gun. Yeah. Is what I wrote. So anyway, about that.
We cut back to Earth, and all the big NASA bigwigs have been called in for a meeting, and there's some bad news.
Yes.
And the bad news is the weather. Mm-hmm. They have a Martian meteorologist come in, and they're talking about a new development, which is that there is a dust storm that is growing right in Mark Watney's path. And these things are huge. Dust storms on Mars in real life can cover the entire planet. They can last for months and months and months, years, and they just choke out the sun. And Mark is working on solar power, and there's nothing they can do to tell him.
And they know that it's going to take him a minute to even recognize that he is in a dust storm, because it's not like you're driving into a blizzard where, bam, suddenly you can't see anything. No, this is
very gradual.
It's very gradual. So I thought that was interesting that that they have all of this fear for him.
Yeah.
I mean, you would, of course, but
yeah, that's got to be a helpless feeling, knowing that he's just gonna barrel into this thing that he couldn't possibly know about. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like he has any kind of connection. And
here, this is did I not say? Mm-hmm. There's a Chekhov's gun. Yeah. And later in the chapter, you figure out how it's rigged to go off in this guy. You know, it's like he's got it in his holster. It's not his fault that this gun is going to go off.
Seriously.
But it is. So I thought that was interesting. Before we move on to the Hermes crew, do you have anything else about that?
Go for it.
Okay. There's this thing that he does that just, it kind of killed me. He was triple checking the atmo regulator in the Rover. Mm-hmm. And so what he does is he puts on his EVA suit, and he cracks a canister of CO2 into the vents to see what happens. And, you know, as he hoped and expected, the computer panicked because, you know, CO2 poisoning, and the regulator kicked into gear and fixed the levels, voila. And I'm just, for what my manager brain, just like all of these alerts went off, and I'm going, man, I wonder what this man's performance review is going to look like, because I feel like it's going to say, this man takes too many chances, but per usual, it all works out, so I guess we're going to keep him. You know, something like that, because he's such a genius, but simultaneously, like,
he is breaking stuff left and right.
He's breaking stuff all the time. And he compares himself to Q, and he says very specifically he's not a James Bond.
Yeah.
And I want to know, are you a Q or a James Bond?
Ooh, that's a good question.
You guys, are you Q or James Bond? Yeah. Or there's I will give you a third option.
There's a third option, which is M.
M.
The commander.
I would love to be M. I would love to say that that's who I am, but I'm not. I'm James Bond.
Yeah, you're James Bond. I'm M.
I don't like this.
Why?
Well, because you don't get to boss me around.
You get to be James Bond.
That's true.
Who's like, I'm James Bond and you're M, and screw you for being M?
Listen, like, I just don't want anyone
everybody
to boss
wants
me
to be.
around.
You know who else doesn't want anybody else to boss him around? James Bond.
I really do like martinis with gin. Yep. Thank you. Yep. I don't care if they're shaken or stirred. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just put olive juice in it.
I am, by the way, on the side of Jed Bartlett, who thinks that James Bond is being snooty because the reason that you stir a martini with a special spoon is to keep the ice from chipping. So a martini that is shaken but not stirred is just a watered down martini.
Listen, you only agree with that because like it makes sense.
Yeah.
You don't even like martinis. So I don't think that you get to have a real opinion on this.
I have found that in life, one of the best doctrines that you can follow is to agree with Jed Bartlett wherever possible.
Okay, you know what? I don't think you're wrong.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Back to the Hermes.
But I do want to know.
Yes.
James Bond, Q or M?
Everybody chime in. We are, by the way, seeing your comments. We got a comment from SoFlo Trash Panda saying that the Martian takes place in 2035 and loved hearing about Mars's closest approach last year until 2035. And my immediate thought was, that's when the Martian takes place.
Which, you know what? That's really, like, good observation. And second, of course he placed it when Mars was at its closest orbit. And I just didn't catch that. So thank you for pointing that out.
Not only did he place it when Mars is at its closest orbit, Andy Weir built a solar system simulator so that he could chart the path of the Hermes through the solar system. So he needed to know not only that it was happening in 2035, he knows exactly what day the Hermes took off, how long their flight plan was, how long they were in orbit around Mars. You can look up these videos on YouTube that he ran these simulations for the flight path of the Hermes through the solar system and the positions of the different planets as it flies.
Seriously, what a
Crazy.
nerd. And then Jay Patel, I just really enjoy frick spheres. Me and the boys like triangles.
Yep.
I'm just like
spheres are not a useful shape.
I really like globes. I'm a maps person, so globes I'm here for. So I disagree with you, Jay Patel, but
Your
I enjoy.
would be better on a triangle. By the way, Jay Patel, are you Jay Grape, or do we have two J's?
No, I think we have two J's.
Really?
So you must always, when you are pointing out your nemesis, you make sure that you use the whole name.
Yeah, it's got to be Jay Grape. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless Jay Patel is Jay Grape, in which case. So back to the Hermes.
Hold on.
Oh,
last thing, I promise. He points out that pressure vessels hate right angles, and I don't know why it's good to know, but it feels good to me. Like I learned that thing today, and I will retain it. And then here's honestly why it's important to me, because I feel like trivia and knowledge are going to be the things that get anybody through the apocalypse if anything happens. And like more than guns and barbed wire wrapped baseball bats. And knowledge is power, and brutality is for those the powerful are willing to forfeit. So be smart, not strong. And listen,
Lacey's enjoying The Martian from the perspective of a survivalist.
I guess. Okay, we were talking about the apocalypse, and my problem with it has always been, listen, I don't know enough to live. Like I could take a bat out there and live for half a second, but I don't feel like I have the knowledge for like rebuilding radios and things like that. But apparently there's a Kickstarter for a book on how to rebuild all of that stuff on Kickstarter, and so I think we have to buy it just to make me feel good.
He is Jay Grape.
Oh
Jay Patel is Jay Grape.
Oh, Jay Patel, why did you tell him that?
Revenge
You could have had two different personalities going and had him totally confused, and he could have loved one and hated the other, and then you could have like surprised him. Surprise! And
if anybody is doubting that I'm married to a supervillain,
I'm a jerk. So anyway.
So back to the Hermes.
The Hermes crew.
They're doing some repairs. They've been in space for way longer than the Hermes was meant to be without a round of repairs. And they're going through some stuff. It's all very interesting. But then the bomb drops. First off, I love the fact that Martinez can't sleep in his room anymore. There's just something kind of charming about the fact that his room is overheating. He says it keeps trying to cook me. And he can't go stay in Mark Watney's room because it's right next door because they're best buds. And it has the same problem. So his solution was that he's been sleeping in airlock 2. And that is just so like, I can just picture Lewis being like, "You've been what?" Like, no, you're not sleeping with one door between you and the void. He's like, it's the only place where people aren't stepping over me.
He's being very conscientious of the crew's needs, which is like, I don't want to be any way.
Yeah.
And I want to sleep.
That being said, Lewis reveals that she is aware. She says, you can sleep in Beck's room, and Beck can go sleep with Johansson, because it's the cutest love story ever. And the whole thing plays out in probably what amounts to like 1 page in the book if you total it all up. But it's just so cute.
I was like, yeah, get it on, guys.
Yeah.
Nice.
Million Mile High Club.
Yeah. I love that Lewis isn't pissed. I like that she gets that people...
And she mentions that she would have been. Like, if this was a normal mission, she would be pissed.
Yeah, but she's like, just don't let it interfere with your work, and it's fine.
And I love that Johansson is just blushing and just sort of retreating into her shoulders.
Nothing for this entire scene. Well, except for, okay, so I think it's interesting that everything is kind of breaking down on the Hermes so much. Like, our cars and computers last so much longer than this. And I'm just...
Well, I think, you know, the ship isn't breaking down because, as they mentioned, the Hermes was supposed to last for the entire Ares program, so it's only halfway through its life. But what it is, the car equivalent here is that they've driven for 50,000 miles and they haven't had an oil change. Like, they haven't been able to bring it into the shop.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. So, I can get behind that a little bit more. I was just sitting there going, is this what we have to look forward to in space travel? Is just like constantly these essentially oil changes, but it does kind of feel like it's a little bit faster than it should have happened. But
yeah, you know, they're doing almost 3 times as much space travel as it was designed to do between pit stops.
And I suppose that in our idea of what future space travel would be, you would have the replacements.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on.
Yes, I do. There, one more thing about Beck and Johansson that I will never get the answer to because this isn't real life and there are no more details than there are included in this book. But I'm kind of desperate to know if Beck and Johansson have been sleeping together, or if they've just been flirting, and this is Lewis's way of saying, "Cut it out and just."
No, I think they've been doing it.
Well, a part of me feels like they have been, but then also a part of me feels like they specifically said that Lewis told the guys not to hit on the hot chick, and so they were all being kind of standoffish. And so Mark knew that Beck had a thing for Johansson, and he was advising Beck to tell her. So clearly it had been going on long enough. Like, without actually coming together, it had been obvious that they wanted to. So the question here is, so the question here is that, have they progressed since then, or is this a matter of people looking at these two and going like, stop fighting it, be together?
Okay, here's my headcanon. Martinez talked about how his wife complained about not being able to get sex, and Johansson was like, dude, yeah. And then she came on to Beck. Yeah. Because
I'm willing to believe that she had to come on to him because he was under specific orders not to come on to her.
But if anybody finds any fan fiction out there about this, I'm here for it.
The Martian fan fiction? How have I not searched for the Martian fan fiction?
I don't know, but I'm here for some hot and heavy romance fan fiction for this. Yes. I'm not usually here for that, but
yes,
yeah, I'm here for that.
Absolutely.
So now we go back to Mars.
Yes.
And Mark has a room.
Yeah.
And I like how it's just this small parallel that Weir has created of, on Hermes, Mark does not have a room that works.
True.
And he has a room here. He has a room on Mars. And it's very exciting. And it's the thing that made me really like this little parallel is it's not cliched. A lot of books would have like weird cliched parallels that are really obvious.
Really heavy-handed. I didn't even pick up on the parallelism there.
And then there's this one. So the lack of cliche is really fun for me. The other thing, I feel like a lot of people know this, and I am late to this knowledge. I didn't know that cooked food had more calories, and a lot of things are starting to click around, veganism and things like
raw
that.
Food diets and all that. Yeah.
I didn't get it.
Partially why we cook food in the first place.
I mean, I see that now. But I didn't know. So anyway, I think that's about the end.
That is also, by the way, why vegetables have crazy low calories oftentimes. It's not that there isn't sugar and stuff in those. It's that you actually end up spending as much or more calories digesting the thing than you got from the thing. So there is a lot of calories in like broccoli, but you have to spend a lot of calories digesting broccoli, so it comes out to be very low calorie.
I obviously know nothing about dieting or tracking calories, so this is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, chapter 22.
Well, I do want to just mention at the end of chapter 21, there's a very sweet and kind of solemn ceremony where he takes down the Hab.
Yeah.
And he says he could have just left it there, but at the end of Sol 31, at the end of the Ares 3 mission, they were supposed to take down the Hab, and so he takes it down as sort of a ritual of the mission that could have been. And there's something about that just got to me. This sort of poignant moment, disassembling the Hab alone, which he shouldn't have had to do alone, but just kind of honoring the Ares 3 that could have been. And, you know, we've talked on this show about different ways that the Martian could have gone. What if Lewis had been stranded there with him? What if he had died before he contacted anybody? And one of the ways that we actually haven't mentioned yet is, what if there was no storm? What if Ares 3 went perfectly?
Yeah.
And they were there for 31 souls and then they left? And I don't know, it's a very beautiful moment as he takes down the Hab.
So he takes 9 days to write to us.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going, yeah, take your time, Mark.
Seriously.
But one of the first things he mentions is psychological milestones. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about milestones in our lives, how, you know, like millennials aren't meeting the milestones that other generations have had before them, buying houses, getting married, having kids, like all of these things. But these are like very, in a lot of ways, physical milestones.
Yeah.
We don't talk about psychological milestones, and I would be fascinated to start setting like psychological milestone goals, because you can, if you have the support or the help you need, you could totally do this. And I don't know, there was just something really lovely and beautiful about that. And I was like, man, I want to start noting those and like putting them in my journal, or which I never write in, or putting them on a calendar or something, just because I feel like they're just as important or more important, but we don't note them. So I just thought that was a good reminder to all of us. Psychological milestones, note them, see them.
He does at this point talk about Marth Valley. He's going into Marth Valley, and we come back to what Lacey and I were mentioning earlier, which is that this is not a river basin. This is a flood basin. This is a mega flood. A mega flood basin where something broke and this whole valley was carved out in a single day. And it actually made me recall one of my favorite facts about Earth's history. Oh. This is, you know, people, if you were to ask somebody, like, what's the one historical event that you wish you could have witnessed, you know, a lot of people will say, like, you know, the crucifixion of Christ, or I wish that I could have witnessed, you know, like D-Day, or, you know, all these different things.
Both of
right?
those are really dark.
I know, right? I don't know, you know, listen to Beethoven perform or something like that.
Oh, man, that'd be cool.
Mine, pretty much without any rivals, is actually from way before humans were around. And that is, if you picture a map in your head of Europe and Africa, in between is a giant body of water called the Mediterranean.
What?
It was dry. The Mediterranean was a dry basin, and the point between Spain and Africa was a dam of rock. And one day, that dam broke.
Oh my God.
And the Mediterranean filled in over the course of a few weeks or months from the Atlantic Ocean, a massive mega flood coming in between Spain and Africa, and filled up the entire Mediterranean.
And so I take it this is before like any sort of humanoid life.
Yeah. This was hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. But whoa, that would have been incredible to watch. And for those of you who are deep nerds out there, and this is a digression, but I apologize, XKCD, the webcomic that a lot of people love, one day posted a comic that sort of wasn't anything. It was just a couple of characters like sitting on the ground staring up at stars. And it took people a while to realize that every hour the image was changing slightly. The stars were moving every hour. And then at one point, one of the characters moved a little bit, and then a little bit more. And then a few hours later, they had stood up. And what people realized was Randall Munroe, who does XKCD, was releasing a short film frame by frame on his website. And it is a future story, but sort of post-apocalyptic. It's, you know, it's humans, but they're living like, you know, cavemen. And they're witnessing something like the flooding of the Mediterranean. And so you get to follow these characters on this journey that took months to release as they realize that their home is about to be flooded, and they try to get their village to move to higher ground because this mega flood is about to happen. And you can tell what year it is because the stars in the sky are like the stars have moved relative to each other, and it's all accurate to how the stars would look in like 50,000 years. And as they walk, they're passing trees that are specific trees with specific leaf shapes, and so you can tell where in the Mediterranean they are, and it's absolutely incredible.
Oh my God, that is super super cool. I was thinking about how I would love to have seen this flood, and apparently that one too. And I would like to be a different Q, the one from Star Trek, just to see it happen. Like, I don't wish to be a god very often. I think it actually sounds really boring, but you get to see sights that we will never lay eyes on as a,
you get to be the sole observer.
And it's not even about being the sole observer. It's just being able to be an observer to these events that I think would be fascinating.
I think, you know, to dig deep into nerd culture, I think what you want is not to be Q. You want to be the Watcher from Marvel Comics. There's a character who exists sort of between universes and watches the universes unfold. And so the superheroes sometimes deal with him because he has so much immense knowledge of the multiverse. And that's, being the Watcher would be interesting. For
like, occasionally.
Yeah.
Not very often.
Not for eons.
Yeah. Okay.
So we cut back to Earth with the Watney report.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Oh, yes, we can do that.
Okay. So we cut back to Earth with the Watney report, and it's kind of depressing because everybody kind of thinks that Mark is just gonna die.
In a dust storm.
In a dust storm, and it's just are we just watching a tragedy? And
I don't. You know when things randomly hit you really hard, and you're like, "What the hell was that? What about that?" For me, I had one of those, and I haven't been able to dissect it or unravel it in a way that makes a lot of sense. But when Venkat says Mark Watney is now an expert at living on Mars, I was just like, oh, I need to take a second. I need to take a long second as I teared up, and I was just like, I was a bit clumped. We'll just say that. But yeah, that was a good little scene, and then we jump back to Mark.
And he's using 16th century technology. He's using a sextant on Mars, which is
he made it
awesome.
in under an hour.
Yep.
And I think it's yet another thing we all need to learn before the apocalypse, whenever that happens.
Yep.
So we don't know when it's going to happen, so we should probably just learn it now.
Yep.
And I feel like school should teach us about surviving in the world. So like taxes and sextants.
Yep.
It doesn't do that for some reason, but I want to know these things.
Seriously, we need more sextant education. And he's using. She says she doesn't like puns, but she likes puns.
No, that would.
No, she likes puns.
No, I don't. But I
do.
do like your two today. Maybe I'm just in a kinder mood.
Yeah. Well, I'm very punny. So there is this slow build-up to him realizing about the dust storm, and it's kind of like it's not as terrifying as the slow build-up to the Iris probe being destroyed, but definitely raises the tension as he's like, it's kind of weird. Like my solar panels aren't working as well as they should.
But even before that, he explains to us. He doesn't know about the dust storm, but he explains to us what all of the obstacles are going to be.
Yeah.
So we've heard from Earth about the solar panels, but he tells us he has to be able to see Phobos to work out his longitude, and that he needs to be able to see Deneb.
Oh, Deneb. The star.
That's I don't like that.
Yeah.
And he has to see it specifically at night to work out latitude, and it's just one more way that we see that this dust storm could start to screw him over.
Yeah, if you can't see the stars, then...
And then he talks about how he admits that it's really, really bad to get off course in Arabia Terra, where the dust storm is, because if he ends up on a crater, he could, one, roll over his rover, or he could spend a lot of energy going up in elevation. And you wouldn't notice immediately that you're going up. So he has to navigate both longitude and latitude, and by careful observation, which is also going to be impeded by the dust storm.
Yep.
And he needs solar panels for power. So there are three ways in which the dust storm is going to screw him.
Yeah.
And I love well-written obstacles. When we go through books together, you guys, you're going to notice that this is something that I bring up a lot. I don't like stupid obstacles. I think it's really important when authors put in obstacles and put in lots, because it makes the story more interesting. It's true to life. I mean, come on. There are very few people who get through life just like super easy. And if they do, they're boring.
Yep.
And if you like fantasy, Jim Butcher in the Dresden Files does obstacles super well. So I am yet again a huge fan of Andy Weir's writing.
Yes, indeed. We have a couple of viewers, by the way, chiming in. Iman Economist says, I'd love to see the construction of some of those massive buildings that are now ruins at the Palatine Hill in Rome.
Ooh, yeah.
That would be awesome. Although it would take a while, because as we know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Jay Patel, also known as Jay Grape, says, maybe I would want to see the asteroid hit Earth, the one that yeeted the dinosaurs. And, I just have to say, it's so fitting that Jay Grape wants to watch things die. That is just pretty on brand for the monster that is Jay Grape.
Listen, Jay Patel, I like you. Don't let him get to you.
She's got terrible taste in people. Got terrible
you were
taste
say
in men. Just terrible taste in men, terrible taste in people. She's terribly untrustworthy.
So one of the other things that I super just like, it's a little thing. Mark Watney is gathering rock samples, and he does it in case he can bring them home. And I didn't realize that when he got to the Mav that he was going to be able to talk to Earth again.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited for him. B, I love that he's doing this as a just in case, and because he knows that it would make all the science geeks at home really happy, and it shows what a good guy he is.
Yeah. And what a scientist. Like, he's, as much as this is about survival, it is still about the science. He still wants to explore Mars. He wants to learn. He wants to gather samples. That's who he is.
And to me, I was like, acts of service.
Yeah.
I love you. This Mark Watney is totally my kind of guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark Watney is deep Hufflepuff. And
hot to trot from Mark Watney.
Yeah. And I love that he doesn't forget the science. He could just make this all about his survival, but he doesn't. And the other thing that's interesting about that is, eventually there's going to be an Ares 4 and an Ares 5, and y'all should go back for those rocks. Like, that is a treasure trove, because if you just land in this one spot, you're going to have samples for thousands of kilometers just already cataloged.
Oh my
All
God,
you have to do is pick them up.
Can you imagine the geologist, like, if he has to leave them and he, because I would imagine that Ares 4 is still going to go to this spot because that's where things are being dropped off.
Could be.
So can you just imagine the geologist being like,
yeah,
this is
right?
so exciting.
Yeah, whoever deals with the rocks on Ares 4, just being like a kid in a candy shop, like it's Christmas morning, because here are the big pile of bags from Mark Watney.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So then we hit up Hermes again.
Yes.
And Martinez and Lewis are talking about Mark's survival.
Yep, and I love Martinez. Martinez, like, there's something, for him, it's obviously at least somewhat religious faith. Like, he has faith in Mark, but he does specify that it's faith in Mark. He's not trusting in God, he's trusting in Mark, and that, Mars has tried to kill him so many times already, and he's still here. And so Lewis is really concerned, and Martinez just isn't. Martinez is just like, nah, he's going to be fine.
Well,
he's going to figure it out.
I love that Lewis when he says to have faith, Lewis is like, I think it's written that she kind of looks at him sadly and she's like, I'm not religious. And I love that it's written with this kind of sadness because she wants to. You can tell that she wishes she had this right now, that it would help her feel good about Mark living. But Martinez still points out, you think he's going to live. Yeah. Like underneath all of this.
You want to bet $100? No. Yeah. He's going to live.
You know he's going to live.
You get it. You get it.
Yeah. And I'm so Lewis in this in that moment because not because of the religious thing, but I'm an optimist, like through and through. However, I often fight against it because
you're a reluctant optimist. You don't want to be an optimist,
no, I don't.
But you are.
But I am, and idealist. And it's because I don't. It's because I don't like getting.
I hate seeing the good in life.
Listen, I hate getting my hopes up, and I hate being wrong. Yeah. And so, if my optimism leads me to be wrong, it really makes me mad. Yeah. So, I kind of feel like in this scene, I would totally be on Lewis's side of, I cannot put all of my eggs into this basket of believing that he's going to make it out alive. Yeah. And it's sad, but also, on the other hand, when we go back to Mark, he's an optimist and he's so excited about the easy, quote unquote, navigation that he has to look forward to.
And I love, so he stops and he's trying to hit the crater in a specific spot, and he stops because he thinks he's in the wrong spot. So he walks up to the rim of the crater, which, first off, what an awesome view on Mars. Lacey and I recently visited Meteor Crater Park in Arizona, and that alone is awe-inspiring.
You guys, they're like, hey, can you see the flag that we planted in the middle of this crater? And you're like, what in the world are you talking about? And then they've got those like telescope things, and you're like, oh my God, there's actually a flag down there. Yeah. Oh, and they put like
this crater is so much bigger than I realized.
Oh, and the rock over there, that's not a tiny rock. That rock is the size of a house. But humans, our eyes are just, they suck. Yeah. And it's fascinating to know that.
Depth. Yeah. But he gets out, he walks to the edge of this crater, and I love, everybody's been talking about how is he going to figure out about the dust storm? How is he going to figure out in time about the dust storm? And this is such a plausible way to figure out about the dust storm, because he looks out on the rim of this crater and he can't see the far end. And he's like, that's weird. And so he looks back at the path that he came, and he can see like 50 kilometers away, there's that, that thing he passed. And then he looks this way, and he can't see that far. And he starts thinking, why would that be true?
And that thing that's 50 kilometers away, he's like, I should be able to see that more clearly.
Yeah. But it's way hazier this way. And that means that there's more haze in one direction than in the other. And then the power cell or the solar panels haven't been working as well. And he starts putting it together. And it's so plausible that he would have figured it out this way in time. He didn't have to go deep into the dust storm to figure it out. It's absolutely, the view is obscured that way, not that way, dust storm.
And
brilliant.
And it speaks to his observation skills.
Yes.
What I was tallying up Mark's confusion about the dust storm, because first he thinks that the reason he's not getting as much power out of the solar panels is because the equipment is aging, which is reasonable because we know that Hermes is struggling with equipment malfunctions because it's aging, right? So totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then he thinks he's fucked up the navigation. Yep. And while it could be because he ends up at the top of this crater and he's like, wait, crap, how did I get here? Mm-hmm. And he blames it on himself, and it could be a him thing. It could also not be. He can still see Phobos and 𝕋𝕙𝕊𝕬𝕤, whatever, the star. But he's working by observation, as Venkat said, and so it wouldn't be terribly noticeable that the visibility is down, and that's why he's not as observing as well as he should be able to. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. So he's got these two, but he doesn't have a third assumption before he realizes it. And there was something really lovely about the observation skills
and the deductions.
Yeah, and the deductions that he makes a couple of reasonable assumptions and then realizes he's wrong.
Yes.
It's not him, and it's not his equipment.
And so much scarier.
It's so much scarier.
Yeah. He does, there's a great line. It's not even the whole sentence, but it really stood out to me because I feel like it's sort of the undercurrent of this entire book, which is, I need to figure out how to figure out. And then he keeps going. But that is the Martian. That is Mark Watney. I need to figure out how to figure out.
Yes.
You know?
One of the quotes that I love is he talks about how he can't wait to be a grandparent because he will get to say to his grandkids, when I was younger, I had to walk on the rim of a crater, uphill, in an EVA suit, on Mars, you little shit. You hear me? Mars.
Yeah. Will Wheaton, by the way, makes an absolute meal out of that. It's hilarious. He does this old crotchety grandpa thing. He's like, I used to walk up, on Mars, you little shits. And it's hilarious.
There's something, like, I imagine my grandpa saying that, and I feel like eventually it would get old, but there's a certain amount of, it gets old because jokes can get old. And
jokes, but not puns.
But there's like this, there would be a pride. There would be a certain amount of pride like, okay, Grandpa, shut up. But yeah, you're right.
Like, for the rest of Mark Watney's life, he gets the absolute trump card on anybody complaining about hardship. There's Mars pass, just absolute. There's no competing.
Then we go back to Earth, and we've got Mindy. And okay, you guys, I love her because she is changing her sleep schedule every single day by 40 minutes to keep up with Mark.
Sync with Mark. This is, by the way, a thing that NASA employees really do. People working on like the Spirit and Opportunity rovers and these sorts of things will maintain a schedule of Mars time, where a Martian day is 24 hours and 40 minutes. So they will, every day, they'll go to bed 40 minutes later, they'll wake up 40 minutes later. And so I actually saw a video where they were talking about how like the employees at the Denny's close to mission control know all the people who are working on the Mars missions, because they'll show up for breakfast at like 2 a.m. and then they'll show up for breakfast at 3 a.m. and then they'll show up for breakfast at 4 a.m. and it just like rotates through.
Yeah.
And, every month or so, they've done a full cycle and they come back full circle. They've just lost a day.
I have this, like, my little heart swells for her. I was like, oh, award her hero points. Hero points are something that I've randomly handed out since high school. I don't currently remember how they started, but yeah, she definitely gets some hero points for her sweetness. I don't know. There's just something lovely. And of course, Watney gets some too for figuring the dust storm out before NASA thought he would. And I have a little bit like I had this conflicting feeling about NASA here, because it seems like they should trust him by now. That he's overcome so many things and he's figured so many things out and he has defied them. I'm going to take apart the water reclaimer. Screw you guys. Like he is confident and capable, and simultaneously it's reasonable for them to be like, no, we're going to triple check his work that he's already triple checked, because it means they make a ton of backup plans. And so there's this, like, I had this conflicting feeling about it. It's
interesting. As we've talked about before, Andy Weir has talked about how The Martian was meant to be sort of science's answer to the religious film. You see these movies, made by Christians for Christians, in which the answer to the solution is to put your faith in God. And so it sort of reinforces this religious message that the way you handle a situation is you reaffirm your faith in God. And so that was The Martian, but for science. That every time he comes across an obstacle, the solution to that obstacle is you figure it out. You go back to the math, you go back to the science, you figure out a solution, and that is sort of the constant affirmation of The Martian. But that being said, religious communities often have a downside to their teachings, and the blind spot of science is that they don't have faith.
No,
they don't trust anything. No. And if they don't see how it works, then they tend not to believe that it does work. And so I like the fact that this is a community of scientists, and they don't know how someone could detect a dust storm, so they're going to assume that he won't detect the dust storm. And you know what?
That's true.
Sometimes, it's true, and sometimes you haven't thought of a way. In this instance, you didn't think of, what if he takes a grand vista in and notices that it's hazy.
Yeah.
And
you know what? That's a really lovely way to put it. Every community has its upsides and its downsides, and this is science. And
yeah.
I would not have considered that. So good observation.
I am loath to say bad things about science. Science is my homeboy, but that being said, one area that science does have a blind spot is scientists and doctors and basically anybody who lives their life by science generally has a blind spot which can be described as, if I don't understand how, I don't think it does. And yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, I think that wraps it up for today.
That's it for this, not too much longer than normal.
A little bit longer. Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you for watching.
For this slightly longer episode.
Yep. And welcome to YouTube Live. Thank you for tuning in for our first episode on YouTube Live. I think it's gone well. We might turn off the camera and be told by our producer that everything was on fire this entire time and we didn't realize it, but I don't expect that's the case.
Nope.
We're going to be doing YouTube Live for a little while longer, just trying it out. So be sure to tune in next week here again on YouTube Live.
And just know that we will be doing chapters 23, 24, and 25.
Yes.
We've only got a couple more episodes before we're done with...
2 more.
Oh my gosh. And then we're going to move on to something else, and we'll let you know what it is.
Yeah.
Feel free to, blow up our socials with ideas of what you'd like to see. I can't promise that we're going to do it. We've already got a couple of ideas up our sleeves.
We've got some good ones, but we always want to know about more movies and TV shows and books that we don't know about. The Synthesis is all about analyzing scientific and historical accuracy in film and television.
I think at this point it's also psychological.
Yep.
Accuracy.
So if you know of any movies or TV shows that are really scientifically accurate or really historically accurate, be sure to share them. We would love to check them out.
And if we are all ever in like a group funk together, we can pick one that we can that's just
roast.
Chaos and roast it, right?
Yeah.
So, let us know what you'd like to see, and we'll see if we feel like accommodating it.
In the meantime, tune in next Thursday, same regular time, 5:30 Pacific, for chapters 23 through 25 of The Martian here on The Synthesis.
Great. We'll see you then, guys.